Welcome to my channel and thank you for clicking on my video. If this is your first visit here, I should just mention this is not how I would normally be dressed. There is a good reason for it and I will get onto that. But before I do, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Share it with anyone you think it might be worth sharing with. And if you do enjoy my video, please do click that subscribe button. It's completely free and it helps me out enormously. My usual channel content is food reviews and taste tests, but if you want to see discussions around more serious issues like eating disorders and mental health, there is a dedicated playlist on my channel page, and any future videos I do around these subjects will be added to that, and you can also find ones I've done in the past if you haven't already seen them. As always with this kind of video, I will do my best to ensure that it isn't triggering in any way, but if at any point you do find that it is unhelpful for you to continue watching, please do click on to another video. I promise I'm not going to hold it against you. In case you weren't aware, this week has been Eating Disorders Awareness Week in the UK. Being a food channel and someone who has had my own issues with food, it would be fitting to do a video around the subject. The theme for this year has been bold and bright. I took it very literally, which is why I look like I have escaped from an 80s themed party. The focus of the week has been on the training, or rather lack of training, received by GPs around the subject of eating disorders. Before I get any further into this, I do need to stress, if you don't already know, I have no background or training in medicine, nutrition, mental health, anything like that. Everything I say comes from my own experiences, things friends have told me, research I've done, and my own thoughts and opinions. Right, let's begin with some numbers, and these are the only numbers you will be getting in this video. These stats come directly from the BEAT website. 1 in 5 medical schools don't provide any training at all. On average, GPs get less than 2 hours training on eating disorders in their entire medical degree. 72% had to wait over 6 months to get help from their GP. Right now, off the top of your head, how many eating disorders can you name? Without using any kind of search engine, I can come up with 9, and there may well be more than 9. And we are talking 2 hours or less for GPs to learn the signs and symptoms of 9 different illnesses, and there can be huge differences between the types of eating disorder. I highly doubt that 2 hours is enough to even cover just one eating disorder in any kind of useful capacity. They present in so many different ways, there can be so many overlaps. I just don't know how anyone can expect GPs to be able to diagnose people with eating disorders. And that's if they even get any training around the subject in the first place. Because, as I said, 1 in 5, they don't get anything. You could be going to see a doctor about your eating disorder. They may not know much at all. And that is kind of scary. In my lifetime, I have lived all over the UK, and it's given me the opportunity to experience myself just how inconsistent services and support are, just depending entirely on where you live. Some areas have great mental health support, great eating disorder teams, and some areas they don't really have anything at all. For some people, their GP can be the only form of help or support that they have access to. And if that GP really doesn't understand eating disorders, how are they really going to be able to help that person? I do appreciate that GPs cannot be expected to be specialists in all areas, because there is just so much that they need to know about in terms of mental and physical health conditions. There's no way we can reasonably expect them to have the kind of knowledge and expertise that you would expect from someone who has chosen to specialise in that area. However, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect GPs to have a basic understanding of conditions that they are highly likely to come across in their careers. As we know, eating disorders, particularly with the recent lockdowns, have soared in numbers. I think there's also a heightened awareness of them, and that's leading to more people presenting at their GPs with eating disorders. And if they are coming to someone to ask for help and that person has no training in even the first steps they need to take, how are they actually going to be able to help that person? There's actually a very high chance that they could make that person worse. And that leads me nicely on to some of the things that doctors have said to me in the past. One doctor told me that I should eat a slice of cake on the way home. Why didn't I think of that? So easy. Oh, didn't even need to go and see him in the first place, did I? And then there's another GP who told me to keep up my excessive exercise, because exercise is really good for mental health and well-being. It's also really dangerous for somebody with an eating disorder. And perhaps the most damaging things that have been said to me, one by a GP, was that my BMI wasn't that low, so it's not that serious. There's nothing to worry about. You'll get over it. And then the community mental health team, who actually told me I would not be referred for any specialist treatment unless my BMI was below a certain number. They told me what this number was and then very quickly said, but don't feel that you've got to get to that number. You tell someone with an eating disorder who is coming to you to ask for help, they cannot have help unless they fit a specific weight criteria. What on earth do you think that person is going to do? They are going to go and do their best to try and fit that criteria. And when they get there, they probably won't want help anymore, because the illness has got a much greater grip on them. Someone with an eating disorder can really struggle with the belief that they are actually sick enough to need or deserve help. And to be faced with these kind of ignorant remarks from the people they are asking for help can be just so detrimental. The fact is, if you have an eating disorder, you are sick enough to get help. If you have an eating disorder, it doesn't matter if you've had it for 1 month, 1 year, 1 decade, you are sick enough to need help, and you have a right to access that help. The fact is, with an eating disorder, the sooner it's treated, the better the chance that person has of making the fullest recovery possible. Can you imagine if you went to your GP because you thought you might have cancer and your GP said, well, I'm sorry, but you're not stage 3, so we can't treat you. Just go off home and try and shrink that tumour by yourself. But if it gets to stage 3, then we'll treat you, although it's highly likely by that point that you might progress to stage 4 and you're not going to be able to make a recovery. Now, I am not comparing eating disorders and cancer. I am comparing the way in which a physical illness is treated compared to the way in which a mental illness is treated. There just isn't the same seriousness around getting help for that person. Imagine if you had to wait 6 months to get your broken leg set. I mean, by that time, the bones will probably have fused together and you may not be able to walk normally ever again, if indeed you can actually walk at all. When you think about it like that, you really can see just how ridiculous it is. And this is how we are living in 2022. Speaking as someone who is over the age of 21, over the age of 25, when people have been struggling with an eating disorder for a very long time, they can find themselves being classified as SEED, which stands for Severe and Enduring Eating Disorder. Being given this label can make people feel almost like they're a lost cause and they're being given up on. People who are now in their 30s, their 40s, 50s, even older, may have been in services for a long time. They may have had multiple hospitalizations. They may have reached a point where they are functioning, but they still have quite a serious eating disorder. But because perhaps they are physically stable, then abnormal blood results or blood pressures, things like that, can just be written off as being normal for that person. So no further action is taken, even though those numbers are not actually normal. And functioning is not the same as living. If someone has previously had a number of hospitalizations and these haven't resulted in long-term improvement, then there can be a view taken that, well, we've tried hospital several times, you've had your chance, it didn't work, that's it, we're not going to let you go in again. Particularly with older people, it needs to be factored in that treatments have changed so much. If someone who was a teenager in the 80s had 3 hospitalizations and they failed, and they come back now wanting help and are told, sorry, you had those hospitalizations all those years ago when we didn't know half as much about eating disorders as we do now. They didn't work, but we're not going to let you have any more inpatient help, even though you want to get better, because you had your shot back in the 80s. I don't believe anyone should be given up on. If somebody has a desire to recover, they should be given the help and support that they need in order to make that recovery. Not everyone who has an eating disorder wants to recover. That doesn't mean they want to be unwell, but it is a very complex illness. And even when somebody does want to get better, it's still one hell of a battle for them. And it's actually better not only to do it as soon as possible, but to do it while that person is still well enough to be in the community, to be at home, to be participating in everyday life. Because once it gets to the stage where people need to go into hospital, apart from the fact that they may not actually be able to get into a hospital, if they do, you run the risk that they could become institutionalised, and not all hospitals are helpful for all people. Again, there's huge discrepancies in the way that different hospitals and even different staff in the same hospital treat eating disorders and other mental health conditions. Certainly with my doctor, when I want an appointment, I pretty much see a different GP every single time. If you're someone with an ongoing mental health issue, that can be really detrimental because there's no consistency. I totally get that GPs are under so much pressure at the moment, and unfortunately it could lead to notes perhaps not being read in as much detail as possible, and that could allow people to discharge themselves from the system or slip through the cracks. And indeed, in the much publicised case of 5 ladies in Cambridgeshire, the consequences can be tragic. Anyone can have an eating disorder, any sex, any race, any age. And not everyone who has one will present in an obvious way. So it's very important that GPs know the types of questions to ask, and particularly eating disorders like ARFID and orthorexia, which can often be put down to just being a picky eater, and it is so much more than that. An eating disorder isn't just a phase, it is a serious illness and it can kill. Mental health cannot be assessed by physical appearance. Body weight cannot determine how unwell someone who has an eating disorder is. If somebody goes in and they are in a larger body and they've lost quite a bit of weight, there's a high chance they may be congratulated on this and told to keep up whatever they're doing because it's obviously working. That person could be starving themselves and or throwing up everything they eat and or doing ridiculous amounts of exercise. Not every eating disorder actually results in weight loss. If you are someone who is struggling to get help and you feel like you're not being heard, I would suggest that you write in a letter exactly what it is that you want or you feel you need. Send it to your GP, send it to your MP, because what have you got to lose? I have tried very hard not to go off on a tangent ranting about things. I've tried to keep this as clear and concise as possible. I think I've probably said enough on the subject for this video. If you do have any type of eating disorder, you deserve help and you should be getting it. Right, I'm going to go and stick on some Rick Astley, get myself a cheese and pineapple hedgehog and throw some 80s shapes. Until next time, take care. Bye. Don't worry, I'm not going to Rickroll you. I don't want a copyright claim.